What we're going to be talking about now is CSS optimization. So we're going to talk about techniques and things that you can do to make your code more optimized, to make it easier to go through and make edits, to make it run faster and more efficiently, and just all in all, help to set up your files so that they will be more beneficial to anyone who's ultimately going to use them. So the first question that we need to ask is, why should you code in an optimized fashion? Well, by creating optimized code, it makes your code more accessible, both to you and to other developers that might be working with you in the future. It also is going to help other designers and developers. When your code is well organized and well structured, it makes it really easy for multiple people to get in there and touch the code. It's also going to speed up your editing process. Even if you go ahead and create a web page with the best intentions in mind, when you come back and look at that web page in a couple weeks or a couple months, you might not remember why you did certain things. So if you come up with a structured format for how you set up your files, it's going to ultimately make it much easier for you to make edits later on. Creating optimized code can also help you kickstart new projects. So as you develop more projects in the future, you might have a set of baseline standards that you're always going to use, and then you can kind of have a starting file that you can work from and make adjustments as necessary. Also, if you approach projects in the same way every time, it makes it much easier for both you to go ahead and work on these projects and to become more efficient at the actual coding process. Things that make your CSS more readable are ordering your CSS properties consistently. There's all sorts of different strategies and techniques to do this, and we're going to be talking about a lot of them in some of these upcoming videos. The next thing you can do is you can indent child elements. This helps to clearly show dependencies within the various items that might be part of your CSS file. I would highly recommend that you use shorthand efficiently. This both is going to cut down on unnecessary lines and file size and file bloat, and it's also going to just make it easier to make changes later on when you go to edit the site. You also want to add comments to explain structure. If you can comment your code, it makes it much easier for other people to see what it was that you had intended to do, or even for you to make changes later on when you come back to a project. You also always want to be aware of how you're using white space, and you want to use it wisely. So we'll talk about some of these things in these upcoming videos. When you write clean code, it helps in many ways. It's going to be very important for the file size and for the readability of the CSS files. It's going to help other people like consumers and other developers just as much as it will end up helping you. And once you have actually come up and developed a disciplined style of coding your CSS, then that can easily be translated into other coding languages like your HTML or JavaScript or any other language that you might be writing. Having optimized code can add to both the user and the developer experience. The files are going to run faster and more efficiently, and when you edit something that is well organized, it's so much quicker to get in there and make changes. And then finally, other people are just going to appreciate and respect the effort that you've made in ensuring that your code is clean. This is also really helpful when you're looking for a job, because if you're trying to get a job as a web developer, the first thing that any potential employer is going to do is they're going to look under the hood. They're going to look at your code. And if they look at your code and then it's just a huge mess, then that is not going to really sell your knowledge of coding. Most of the time when you get a job for a company, you're going to have to be working with other people. So any way that you can efficiently set up your files and present them in a manner that goes ahead and shows that it's going to be easy for other people to work with you, that is huge. And I guarantee when you go to apply for a job, what happens is the person in charge of hiring, they go right to their developers and they say, hey, this person's applying for the job. What do you think? And then the developer is going to immediately look at the code, and if the code is well commented, organized, structured in a manner that's efficient, that's going to make an impression on them, and they're going to pass that on to whoever asks them, and that definitely is going to help you when you're trying to get work. So keep that in mind. What we're going to be doing in this part of the course is we're going to be working on a web page that I've created, and the web page looks like this. We're not going to worry really so much about the web page itself because the web page is not visually going to change. We're going to be exclusively working with the code. This is a responsive web page, so as I resize it, you can see that it changes and it goes to a one-column layout or a multi-column layout depending on the size of the screen. And it just uses techniques that we've talked about as we've gone ahead and gone through this course. The code that we're going to be working with, this is the HTML. So the HTML is pretty simple. It's an HTML5 document just like we've been working on in the past. It has a linked external style sheet, which we're going to be spending a lot of time with this style sheet file. It's calling in some web fonts that are being hosted by Adobe. So those are the special fonts that are showing. We're setting it up to be a responsive website, and then we have the HTML5 elements throughout the page. So we have a header, we have an image, we have a nav tag with the navigational elements, we have a couple of sections. The first section just has this H1, then we have a section which holds the additional content, and this contains an H2 and some paragraphs. Here's the H1 part of the page right here, and then this section of the page right over here is the section 2, or as it's called here, it's called section right and section left. And then there's a footer with some copyright information. The CSS that we're going to begin working with is right here. So the CSS is placed on the CSS document, and it has the various selectors that are being used throughout our file. It goes down to the bottom and it has the media queries, which go ahead and style this for the alternate screen views. So there's 2 media queries in this particular file. And if you look through this file, you'll notice that the file definitely can be optimized. There is a lot of areas that can be reduced by using shorthand, and also the file doesn't really make sense. Like, it starts off with some tags like H1 and H2, here's body, here's footer, we go down into nav, we have a nav wrapper, then we have the section tags here, we go into a header declaration, a class for logo, we have some rules for our link colors, then we have the navigational links, we have our rules for our media queries. So in itself, it's not that complex of a page. It's about 220 lines with the CSS, but we're going to definitely optimize this and make this much easier to read and to understand what's going on and to make changes later on. So we'll be talking about some of the things that I mentioned at the beginning of this lecture, the various things that we can do to optimize our code and make it work better in the upcoming lectures.